That particular Saturday afternoon was unfolding with a lazy, deliberate pace, the kind where time seems to stretch and soften around the edges. I was sprawled on my sofa, aimlessly navigating the digital currents of my phone, when a text message lit up the screen. It was from Laura, my best friend Ryan's mom. She was asking if I could spare an hour to help her with something. Ryan was out of town for the weekend with his girlfriend, and she'd had a new bed frame delivered that she couldn't manage on her own. It didn't strike me as any great imposition, just a simple neighborly favor. I texted back that I was on my way. Laura's house wasn't far, just a short drive across the quieter tree-lined streets of our Chicago suburb. It was a route I could navigate with my eyes closed. I knew his mother, Laura, would be there, but that was a given. In all the years I'd known them, she was a constant, steady presence in the background of my friendship with Ryan. She was usually either working in her home office or relaxing in the living room with a book. I'd never given her much thought beyond acknowledging that she was remarkably attractive for her age. She had to be in her early 40s, but a youthful energy clung to her, defying the years. In my mind, she was permanently categorized as Ryan's mother. That was the beginning and end of it. No further analysis was required. So, when I rapped my knuckles on the front door, I was fully prepared for the familiar maternal greeting. Instead, the door swung open to reveal a version of her I hadn't seen before. She was dressed in comfortable-looking yoga pants and a simple tank top that clung to her form. Her blonde hair pulled back in a slightly messy ponytail. She looked a little flustered but offered a warm, genuine smile. My eyes did a quick involuntary survey before I forced them to meet hers. A sudden and unexpected warmth creeping up my neck. Is the air in here thick enough to saw through? "Hey, Alex," she greeted, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Ryan's on that camping trip until tomorrow." She gestured vaguely behind her. "What brings you by?" I felt myself stumble over a reply for a half-second before remembering why I was there. "The bed?" I said, feeling foolishly obvious. "Your living room and up the stairs." The conversation was initially light, filled with easy chatter about Ryan's trip and my classes. But as we began the awkward process of maneuvering the heavy boxed pieces of the new bed frame up the narrow staircase, I felt the dynamic between us shift. We were close, our arms sometimes brushing, the shared physical effort creating a new kind of intimacy. She spoke about her life, about the quiet that had descended on the house as Ryan grew more independent, and how despite being surrounded by people in her daily life, a profound sense of solitude would often creep in. For a few minutes, I completely forgot I was talking to my best friend's mother. It was just the two of us, Alex and Laura, sharing a moment of unguarded honesty. And the way she would occasionally catch my eye suggested she was genuinely interested in what I had to say, in who I was beyond being her son's friend. That was the moment something inside me began to recalibrate. I started to see her in a new light. There was a whole person there, separate from her role as Ryan's mom. After we finally got all the pieces into her bedroom, she stood back, a soft, almost mysterious smile playing on her lips. "Alex, you've really grown into such a fine young man," she observed. "It's hard to reconcile with the memory of you and Ryan tearing through this house as little boys." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just offered a small appreciative nod. A new kind of energy was crackling in the space between us, something unspoken but undeniably present. I could feel it, a subtle spark, a quiet tension that I couldn't yet decipher. But I knew with a certainty that surprised me that I wasn't in any hurry to leave. She moved toward the boxes and I followed, our proximity in the room feeling both natural and charged. As she passed by me to grab the instruction manual, I caught the light, clean scent of her perfume. And for that fleeting moment, the label of Ryan's mom dissolved completely. She was just a woman, an individual with her own history and her own unfulfilled needs. "Thank you again for coming over," she said, turning back to face me. It wasn't just her physical appearance. It was the deliberate way she moved, the quiet confidence that she exuded. It was as if she possessed some secret knowledge about the world that the rest of us were still trying to figure out. I hadn't expected to cross paths with her, and frankly, I wasn't sure how to act. We hadn't spoken since that strange afternoon with the bed frame, but something about that day had stayed with me, resonating in my thoughts. Something about her smile and the directness of her gaze lingered. I had tried to dismiss it as a one-off, a weird anomaly, until she looked up and her eyes met mine. "Alex," she said, her voice a low murmur, accompanied by a calm, inviting smile. It was the kind of voice that had an immediate disarming effect, making you feel instantly at ease. I smiled back, doing my best to project an air of casualness. "Hey, Laura. Didn't think I'd see you here." She explained she was just picking up a few things for the house, gesturing toward the lampshade in her hand. "Are you working on a project?" It was a simple question, but it bloomed into a full conversation. We talked about home improvement, the unpredictable weather, and other inconsequential topics. But beneath the surface of the small talk, there was a pulsing undercurrent of something deeper. A subtle but palpable tension hummed between us, communicated through small glances and quiet smiles. Then, out of the blue, she asked, "Are you busy tonight?" She said it nonchalantly, as if the answer didn't much matter, but I could sense she was gently probing. I wasn't sure how to respond. I gave a slight shrug. "Not really, just planning on a quiet night at home." She offered a faint, knowing smile. "Ryan is staying over at his girlfriend's place tonight. I was thinking of making some lasagna. You should come over. It would be nice to have some company." The invitation caught me completely by surprise. My immediate conditioned response was to find a polite way to decline. After all, what did we really have to talk about that didn't involve Ryan? But the sincerity in her offer made it difficult to refuse. Before my brain could formulate a proper excuse, I heard myself saying, "Yeah, sure, I'd like that." And that was it. I had no idea what I was stepping into for years. She looked the same, but some invisible barrier had been lowered, revealing someone more authentic, more open. "Go ahead and make yourself comfortable," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Dinner's almost ready." I took a seat at the kitchen island, trying to appear more relaxed than I felt. She moved about the kitchen with an effortless grace, as if she was in her natural element. I, on the other hand, sat there trying to make sense of the storm of feelings brewing inside me. It wasn't just about how she looked or how at ease she seemed. It was about how she made me feel seen, as if I were more than just her son's friend. We ate and the conversation flowed with surprising ease. There were no awkward lulls or forced pleasantries. We talked about life, about the winding paths we take and how things rarely unfold according to plan. She spoke about her younger days, reminiscing about the thrill of spontaneity and the excitement of the unknown, things she missed. She admitted that with Ryan gone so much, her life had settled into a predictable, sometimes lonely routine. There was a raw edge to her voice when she said it, as if she were finally releasing words that had been held back for years. Tired of pretending everything was perfectly fine when it wasn't. I just listened. I didn't offer any grand advice or profound insights. I simply nodded and gave her the space to speak. And even in my silence, I was noticing things. The way her eyes would light up when she spoke about something she was passionate about. The genuine, uninhibited sound of her laughter. She was no longer just Ryan's mother. She was a woman with her own thoughts, her own feelings, and her own life. "Thank you," I said as we finished eating, and I started helping her clear the plates. She smiled at me, and for a brief second I saw something deeper flicker in her gaze. "I'm so glad you came over," she said. "It's been a long time since I've had a real conversation with someone." I didn't know what to say, so I just gave a slight nod, but I knew we were both thinking the same thing. There was a current running between us now, something we didn't need to name aloud. When it was time for me to leave, she gave me a hug at the door. It was simple, brief, and warm, but her push it away to convince myself that nothing significant had happened. A few days later, Ryan called and asked if I wanted to go out for a drink. I thought getting out might help clear my head, but as soon as I walked into the dimly lit pub, I saw her. Laura was sitting at the bar with a couple of her friends. She saw me and her face broke into a smile as she waved me over. Without a second thought, I waved back. Her smile was relaxed, but it held a warmth that hadn't been there before. a silent acknowledgement of our shared evening. A little flutter went through my stomach. "Hey, Alex," she said as I approached. "I didn't expect to run into you tonight." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just meeting up with Ryan. I didn't realize you'd be here." She let out a light laugh. "Yeah, just catching up with some old friends. It's been a while since I had a night out." Her eyes held mine for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. And just like that, the tension was back, that subtle undercurrent that hummed between us, always there, just beneath the surface. I should have walked away, should have said good night and found Ryan, but I didn't. Instead, I took the empty stool next to her. We talked, we laughed, and we pretended that there was nothing unusual about the situation. Eventually, Ryan showed up and joined us. The three of us sat there reminiscing about old times, talking about school, and laughing about the silly things we used to do. But even with the lively chatter swirling around us, my attention kept drifting. And every time Laura glanced my way, I felt it. That shift, that unspoken thing that her laughter or her looks seemed to trigger in me. Something I didn't fully understand. We both felt like we were guarding a secret that neither of us was brave enough to articulate. At one point, Ryan got up to order another round, leaving Laura and me alone at the table. I hadn't planned on saying anything, but the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "So, Laura, how have you really been?" She paused, her smile fading slightly. For a moment, I saw my perception of Laura had crystallized into something new. She was no longer just a friend's parent. There was a different kind of light around her now, a magnetic, almost dangerous sort. Later, when we all decided to head home, I walked with Ryan to his car, but my thoughts were consumed by that brief, quiet exchange with her. What did she really mean by lonely? Was it a simple feeling of boredom, or was it a gentle request for something more? As soon as I got home, I sank onto my couch and replayed the entire evening in my mind. That dinner, that confession at the bar, that look in her eyes. It was then that I realized this wasn't just a series of random encounters. Something was happening between us, something unspoken and powerful. And whether I wanted to admit it or not, I was being drawn into it. The most frightening part, I wasn't sure I wanted to resist anymore. The next few days felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about the pub and the way Laura had opened up to me. Her quiet admission of loneliness. The way her gaze had lingered on mine as if she were searching for something. There was a weight in the air between us that I couldn't shake. No matter how hard I tried, I kept telling myself it was nothing, just a fleeting moment of shared vulnerability. But I knew better. Ryan and I had always been inseparable. He was my best friend. But lately, even when we were hanging out, I felt my mind wandering. Kept returning to her, to Laura. I hated that about myself. I hated the intrusive thoughts that refused to be dismissed. The way she smiled, the way she carried herself, it all felt different now, charged with new meaning. That Saturday, I decided I needed to clear my head. I called Ryan and suggested we go to the park and shoot some hoops just like we used to. Maybe some physical exertion could quiet my racing mind. When I got to the court, Ryan was already there practicing his free throws. He looked up and grinned when he saw me. "About time you showed up," he joked, tossing the ball to me. I forced a smile and mumbled something about being held up. We played hard for the next hour, joking and talking trash, trying to one-up each other, but my head wasn't in the, "I don't know," I said, keeping my tone non-committal. "Have you talked to her about it?" He shook his head. "Not really. Every time I try, she just brushes it off. I don't want to push, but I can just feel that she's not totally okay." I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to confess everything, to tell him about the shifts I had felt, the changes in her and in me. But I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Maybe she just needs some space, I offered, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," he murmured. "Maybe." But I could hear the doubt in his voice. He wasn't convinced. We finished our game and headed back to his place. The entire drive, my stomach was in a tight knot, as if I were being pulled towards something I couldn't prevent. We walked through the front door and there she was. Laura was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. She looked up when we came in, her face arranged in a pleasant smile, as if everything were perfectly normal. "Hey, you too," she said brightly. But I could see the faint shadows of fatigue under her eyes. I noticed the slight tension in her posture. She was playing a role. "Hey, Mom," Ryan said, dropping onto the couch beside her. "You doing all right?" he asked, his concern evident. Laura paused for a beat before nodding. "Yeah, just one of those long weeks." I could tell she was downplaying it, treating it as nothing. I didn't challenge her, mostly because I wouldn't have known how. My own heart was pounding louder than I wanted to admit. I made my way to the kitchen, needing a moment to breathe, to escape the heavy atmosphere in the other room. But as I reached for a glass of water, I heard soft footsteps behind me. Laura was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. "Alex," she said quietly, her voice calm but direct. "Can we talk for a minute?" I turned startled. Yeah, sure. What's up?" She stepped into the kitchen, gently closing the door behind her. The space between us shrank, and I felt my chest tighten as she moved closer. "I just wanted to thank you for the other night," she said, her eyes not quite meeting mine. I considered asking her. I almost asked what was happening between us, but I held back. I just stood there trapped in the silence with her, wondering what the next move was. Finally, she broke the spell with a quiet, "Thanks again, Alex." "Anytime," I replied. But a part of me knew that the word didn't mean the same thing it used to. A week went by after that conversation in the kitchen. It hadn't been dramatic or loud, but it had lingered with me. Every time I saw Laura after that, the air felt different, charged with an electric potential. I couldn't tell if she felt it too or if I was just projecting my own internal turmoil onto our interactions. Regardless, the dynamic between us had fundamentally changed, and I couldn't ignore it. Ryan and I hung out as we always did. He laughed and joked, trying to keep things light, but it didn't help. Every time Laura entered a room, my eyes were drawn to her. I noticed the small things, like the way she tilted her head when she listened, and the way her gaze would meet mine for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. I felt it. Then came the following Saturday. Ryan had made plans with his girlfriend, which meant I found myself alone at their house, waiting for him to get back so we could head out. It wasn't what I had planned, but I didn't mind. In truth, I welcomed the solitude. I needed the space to try and sort through the chaos in my head and my gut. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard her voice call out from down the hall. "Alex." I looked up surprised to see her standing there, her expression unreadable. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart had already started to race. She walked into the living room, hesitated for a moment, and then asked, "Can we talk?" That simple question made my stomach clench. "Yeah, of course," I said, setting my phone aside. She came over and sat on the couch next to me. We weren't touching, but the space between us felt infinitesimally small. The air grew heavier. The room felt smaller. I've been thinking a lot about before. I had no idea where it would lead, but I couldn't stop myself from hearing her out. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice becoming softer, more cautious. Laura took a deep breath and looked down at her hands, nervously fiddling with the hem of her sleeve. "I think you know," she said gently. "There's been something between us, Alex, and I can't keep pretending it's not there." I froze. Her words hit me squarely in the chest with more force than I could have imagined. I had felt it, of course, but hearing her say it out loud made it real, tangible, and terrifyingly confusing. "I'm not trying to make things awkward," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm just not sure how to handle this. But I can't keep acting like nothing is happening." I looked at her, my mind racing in a dozen different directions. Every rational part of me was screaming that this was wrong, that I should not be in this situation. And yet there I was. "I don't want it to be weird either," I said, my voice betraying my struggle to remain calm, to keep the entire situation from imploding. "But I don't know what you want me to say." She met my gaze then, her eyes direct and steady. We sat in silence for a long moment. The quiet was thick, heavy, with all the things we couldn't say. Then she reached out. Her hand brushed against mine, a touch so light it was barely there, but it sent an electric jolt through me. My breath hitched in my throat, and for a few seconds I couldn't move. "This isn't just me being lonely, Alex," she whispered. Her eyes locked on mine. "I don't know what this is, but I can't ignore it anymore. And I don't want to." A tidal wave of emotions washed over me all at once. Guilt, curiosity, desire, fear. I was acutely aware of the risks. I knew what could happen if anyone ever found out. But the connection between us was undeniable. And a part of me, a very large part, didn't want it to stop. "Are you sure?" I asked. Delicate thing we kept hidden away. We had an unspoken agreement from the very beginning. Our happiness mattered. And that happiness was built on a foundation of trust. A unique kind of trust that allowed us to be completely open with each other while remaining completely hidden from the rest of the world. We built our own little bubble, our own miniature reality. But the guilt never fully disappeared. Every time I was with Ryan, a sharp pang would hit the back of my mind. It wasn't because I thought he deserved to know. I knew the truth would only hurt him, but because carrying a secret of this magnitude always leaves a mark. Nevertheless, I never once second-guessed the choice we had made. We had both chosen this, and no matter how complicated or messy things got, being with her always felt right. Laura and I saw each other whenever we could, which wasn't often. We never pushed our luck. We kept everything discreet, quiet, and out of sight. The hardest part was the performance. Ryan would be around smiling and oblivious, and we would have to act as if we were nothing more than his mother and his friend. We kept our hands to ourselves, our conversations platonic. But those tiny moments, the quick shared glance across a room, the subtle smile that was only for me, the fleeting brush of our hands when no one was looking, they became our language. They were what sustained us. When we were alone in her house, we would sometimes talk about what might happen if the truth ever came out. We never had a concrete plan, just vague what-ifs and half-formed ideas. But we didn't dwell on it for long. We stayed in the present, in the quiet in-between spaces where we didn't have to explain ourselves to anyone, where we could just be. It was a calm Saturday evening, almost exactly a year after our secret had begun. I was at Laura's house, sitting on the couch, the very same couch where it had all become real. The house was peaceful. Ryan was out with his friends, so we had the place to ourselves again. Everything felt normal now, comfortable in a way that had once been so foreign. We had learned how to exist in this state of quiet caution, of deep connection. We no longer needed to constantly talk about our feelings. The relationship had settled into something steady, something real. It was unconvention time, I admitted. Honestly, I still can't quite believe we've made it this long. I looked over at her. The initial shock and confusion I'd once felt now replaced by something that felt a lot like gratitude. "It doesn't feel like a year," she laughed. She let out a soft laugh and rested her head on my shoulder. "It doesn't, does it?" she murmured. "But at the same time, it feels like this was always where we were headed. Like this was meant to happen." I nodded slowly, my hand finding hers. "Yeah, it's weird," I said. "But it's a good kind of weird. I never expected my life to look like this. But now that I'm here, I wouldn't change a thing." She tilted her head up, meeting my gaze with that same look that always seemed to make the world stand still. She replied gently, "Me neither. Considering the circumstances, I think we've done pretty well for ourselves. I'm glad we kept it just between us." Her voice was firm, certain. "It's ours. It's just ours." She liked, and she was right. That was the most important part. It wasn't about anyone else. This was something we had built together quietly and carefully. "I'm happy," I replied softly, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "We're happy. That's what matters." We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. We just sat there side by side, wrapped in a silence that didn't need to be filled. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. A year had passed. A whole year of hiding in plain sight. We had somehow made it work. We had kept the secret. We had protected what we had. And through it all, we had held on to the one thing that mattered most, each other. As the evening wore on and the sky outside deepened to black, one thought became crystal clear in my mind. This was how I wanted things to stay. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and strange and complicated, but it was real and it was ours.